Here's something you didn't know. A hidden force has been feeding on your energy without you even noticing. Yes, you heard me right. Spiritually attuned people are magnets for things most people never experience. And one of those things is what many call an archon, a parasitic force that drains you quietly. Most people host these attachments for years without realizing it. They think it's just life, just stress, just not feeling like themselves. But you're here right now because something inside you knows there's more to the story. And the signs? They're clearer than you think. Archons don't always feel dark or threatening. In fact, they often feel familiar, almost comfortable. Because they don't enter your life through fear, they enter through wounds. It usually begins after you've been around someone who made you question your worth. A person who made you feel small. Every moment you were undervalued. Every time you held back your voice. Every time you shrank yourself just to keep the peace. Those moments create an internal echo. And eventually, you start repeating their voice as if it's your own. That echo is the archon. That's where it attaches. Not to your soul, but to the parts of you that learn to doubt yourself. And once it's there, it begins shifting how you see your life, your energy, your choices, quietly reshaping everything from the inside out. Before anything shows up in your energy, it starts somewhere much more ordinary, in your real life. These attachments don't crash into your aura like some monster. They grow slowly in the cracks of your experiences. And there are a few specific gateways where they slip in almost every time. One of the biggest is getting pulled into the same toxic relationships over and over again. You know the ones, the people who drain you emotionally, make you doubt yourself, or make you feel like you're never doing enough. Every time you go back to someone who diminishes you, a small part of you opens up, and something unwelcome can take root in that space. Another entrance point is unresolved pain you've been carrying for years, unprocessed anger, old wounds, buried humiliation. These aren't just memories. They become open doors. What you refuse to face will find a way to feed off you. And that's exactly where this energy begins to gather, right in the parts of you that never got a chance to heal. Then there's the trap of endless spiritual searching with no grounding. When you're constantly looking for the next meaning, the next sign, the next awakening, without ever integrating what you've already learned, you create a kind of gap between who you are and who you think you should be. That gap becomes incredibly vulnerable to outside influence. And finally, one of the sneakiest gateways, obsessing over being pure or perfect. The moment your spiritual journey becomes a performance instead of a path, you weaken your sense of self. Perfection isn't enlightenment, it's self-erasure. And that erasure is exactly where these attachments are born. All of these experiences create the same outcome. A mental echo, a quiet inner voice that doesn't sound like you, but slowly starts to guide your reactions, your fears, and your choices. That echo is the birthplace of the attachment, and most people never even notice when it begins. But you will, once you know what it sounds like. Now let's get into the signs. The ones that don't look supernatural at all. They look like your own thoughts, but the intensity behind them is the giveaway. The most obvious sign is becoming excessively self-critical for no real reason. Not the normal kind of self-doubt. The kind that hits out of nowhere, even on days when nothing went wrong. You might catch yourself tearing yourself apart for tiny mistakes, hating the way you speak, the way you look, or the way you show up in the world. When the inner critic sounds harsher than you've ever been toward yourself, that's not just insecurity. That's an influence feeding on your lowest perception of yourself. When your inner voice becomes your enemy, It's not your voice anymore. Another sign is when you can't stop replaying past conversations, especially ones where someone embarrassed you, dismissed you, or made you feel small. You're not choosing to relive those moments. Something in you keeps dragging them back to the surface. It's like a loop that refuses to end, no matter how much time passes. These aren't random habits. These loops are fueled by residual emotional energy that didn't originally belong to you. When someone disrespected you, their energy left an imprint. When you internalized it, the attachment formed around that imprint and kept it alive. Most people think these patterns are just their personality. They think it's just how they are now. But once you see the pattern for what it really is, the entire story changes. And you start realizing just how much of your inner world has been shaped by something that was never yours in the first place. These attachments don't survive on their own. They need fuel, and more often than not, that fuel comes from the people you continue to allow into your life. Even if the original person who made you doubt yourself is long gone, the emotional imprint they left behind doesn't disappear automatically. It lingers, waiting for someone, anyone, to keep feeding it. And this is where patterns become dangerous. Think about the people you interact with regularly, not the obvious enemies, but the subtle drainers, the friend who jokes about your goals like they're unrealistic, the relative who downplays your achievements because they're secretly threatened, the partner who pretends to support you, but always redirects the conversation to themselves. These small jabs add up. Every dismissal, every passive-aggressive comment, every moment someone makes you second-guess your progress becomes a recharge point for the same energy that first attached to you. It goes deeper than just toxic behavior. Sometimes it's the people who want you to stay exactly where you are because your growth would disrupt their comfort. They don't need to say it outright. You can feel it. They keep you insecure because your insecurity benefits them. If you doubt yourself, you won't outgrow them. If you stay exhausted, you won't set boundaries. If you feel lost, you'll rely on them more. The attachment thrives on that dynamic. This is where awareness becomes your compass. Start asking yourself the real question: who benefits when I stay insecure? Who gains when I shrink? Who feels comfortable when I silence myself? The answers might surprise you because they reveal exactly where the energy keeps getting recharged. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. The attachment doesn't just live in you. It lives in the environment that keeps the old wound alive. When you identify those patterns, you're not just noticing who drains you, you're identifying the ecosystem that keeps the entire cycle running. That's when the shift begins. Now here's the part most people never hear. These attachments collapse the moment you start living in a way that aligns with who you truly are. They feed on distortion, confusion, double standards, and half-truths. So when you begin stepping into your real values, even in quiet ways, the attachment loses its oxygen. These entities can't breathe where there's truth. Integrity isn't perfection, and it isn't moral performance. Integrity is simply the commitment to live in a way that matches your inner reality. When you start speaking honestly, choosing clearly, and honoring what you actually feel, the energy that once fed on your uncertainty begins to starve. Every time you show yourself compassion instead of criticism, the attachment weakens. Self-love is not just healing. Self-love is a weapon. Look at the small promises you make to yourself: waking up at a certain time, finishing a task, protecting your peace, choosing rest when your body needs it. Every time you follow through, you rebuild the inner world where these attachments can't survive. They thrive in broken commitments because broken commitments reinforce the narrative that you can't trust yourself. But once you begin keeping your word, even in small ways, you create a spiritual environment rooted in self-respect. Then there's the power of saying no when you mean no, not pretending you're okay with something, not forcing yourself to be agreeable, not sacrificing your needs to avoid disappointing people who wouldn't do the same for you. When you honor your boundaries, you disrupt the emotional patterns that allowed the attachment to survive in the first place. And perhaps the most powerful thing, being honest about what you really want. Not what you think you should want, not what others told you to want, but what actually feels like your path. Desires align you with your purpose, and purpose is something no attachment can latch onto. When you start admitting your truth, even silently to yourself, the energy that once manipulated your doubts disappears like smoke. These aren't just self-improvement ideas. These are acts of spiritual liberation. Integrity, truth, and self-love dismantle the very structure these attachments depend on. And every time you choose yourself, even in the smallest way, something inside you wakes up and remembers its power. The moment you decide to remove this influence begins with something incredibly simple: noticing the thoughts that keep shrinking you. Not the normal doubts everyone has, but the ones that feel strangely familiar, as if they were planted there long before you ever questioned them. When a thought makes you feel small, pause and ask yourself where it actually came from. Was it yours? Or did someone put it there years ago and you kept carrying it because no one ever told you that you didn't have to? Once you recognize that the voice inside your head doesn't fully belong to you, everything begins shifting. This is where you start rewriting the script. Say the thing you needed to hear in those old moments. The words you never received, the validation that was missing, the truth that should have been spoken. Healing begins the moment you give yourself the sentence they never said. Every time you replace their message with your own, you weaken the hold that energy has on you. And when a thought tries to pull you down, don't let it run unchecked. Question it. Challenge it. Ask, can you prove that? The moment you interrogate that voice, it loses authority. The attachment was never strong because it was powerful. It was strong because you believed it without questioning it. Once you shine light on where these thoughts came from, they stop feeling like truth and start looking like the residue they really are. Now comes the most important part, realizing that this was the intention all along. That shrinking feeling, that was the outcome someone wanted from you. They wanted you insecure. They wanted you uncertain. They wanted you to believe you were the problem so they could stay comfortable in their role. And you can't give them that anymore. When you stop performing for someone else's comfort, you reclaim every part of yourself they tried to dim. The only reason this influence affects you now is because you didn't know the origin of the thoughts pressing down on you. But once you recognize that they aren't yours, the entire structure collapses. You stop accepting the blame, you stop absorbing the shame, you stop mistaking someone else's voice for your intuition. You finally see the separation, and that is where freedom begins. Refuse to carry what was never yours. Say it internally or out loud, I'm not holding someone else's shame. That's not mine. And the moment you say it, you cut the final thread that kept their energy alive inside you. Tonight isn't about rituals or cleansing or complicated steps. It's about reclaiming the space in your mind that was borrowed by a voice that never had the right to be there in the first place. One of the most overlooked ways this lingering energy affects you is through your focus. Not in dramatic ways, not through chaos or breakdowns, but through subtle mental noise that creeps in exactly when you're trying to move forward. You sit down to think clearly. You try to create something. You try to organize your life, make a plan, commit to a new chapter, and suddenly your mind fills with doubts, pointless distractions, or an urge to scroll for no reason. It's not loud enough to feel suspicious, but it's consistent enough to keep you stuck. This is not random. When someone's emotional imprint lives in your mind, it clutters your internal space. It hijacks your attention and redirects it toward anything that prevents clarity. You might feel mentally tired before you even begin, or overwhelmed by tasks you normally handle easily. You may find yourself forgetting what you were about to do, or losing momentum as soon as inspiration hits. It's like trying to think in a room full of whispers. Nothing loud enough to identify, but just enough noise to scatter your concentration. The tricky part is that this interference feels natural. You think you're just being unproductive, unfocused, lazy, or lacking discipline. But the truth is much deeper. Your attention is being drained by emotional energy you never agreed to keep. Distraction isn't weakness. It's often the residue of a story that wasn't yours to carry. These lingering echoes behave like background processes, running quietly while you try to function, pulling on your energy like a hidden weight. And when someone's past words live rent-free in your head, they don't just influence how you feel. They influence how much you can do. They shape your capacity to focus, imagine, create, or believe in yourself. You try to move forward, but you're dragging emotional debris that keeps pulling you back into old versions of yourself. That's why clearing these attachments isn't just about feeling better. It's about reclaiming your mental real estate. The moment you realize your focus has been under quiet attack, you start taking it personally in the right way. You stop blaming yourself for the noise and start recognizing what caused it. And that shift of awareness alone rewrites the entire dynamic. Because once you identify what's stealing your focus, you can finally take it back. When you finally get close to breaking free of this influence, there's always one final strategy it tries to use, and it's the most convincing one of all. It isn't fear, and it isn't doubt. It's isolation, not the physical kind, but the emotional illusion that convinces you no one understands you, no one relates to you, and no one would stay if they saw the real you. It shows up as that subtle inner voice saying, "You're too different, you're too weird, you're on your own now." And that voice feels personal because it uses your insecurities as the foundation for the lie. But that voice is the last desperate attempt to stop you from stepping into your own power. It's the same old script, trying to convince you that the moment you evolve, you lose everyone. It wants you to believe that growth separates you, that clarity isolates you, and that healing somehow pushes you out of the world. Nothing could be further from the truth. The only thing you're outgrowing is the version of yourself that tolerated what drained you in the first place. Isolation is the last card because it's the most effective one. If you feel alone, you're more likely to shrink back into familiar patterns. If you feel misunderstood, you're more likely to silence yourself again. And if you silence yourself, the attachment survives. That's why the idea of being too different gets whispered right at the point where you're reclaiming your identity. When you step into your truth, you don't lose people. You lose the people who needed you powerless. You are not isolated. You are not strange. You are not behind everyone else. You are simply stepping into a level of self-awareness that most people never reach because they're too afraid to confront the parts of themselves you've already started facing. You're not alone. You're ahead of the curve. The moment you realize this, the illusion of isolation collapses, and what's left is the recognition